hello, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us. Today on the show, we catch up with the chef, national TV weather presenter and musical theatre star, and now leader in his own right. In our case, it's the same person, New Zealand's Russell Dixon. I saw Russell on TV before I met him. He was Gaston, one of the leads in the musical Beauty and the Beast way back in 2006 when I was part of the ensemble cast. Now, Russell has a fascinating story. He's been on TV, he's performed on stage around the world, including on the West End. Now he's a director and also a lead consultant. He's back in New Zealand with a full-on busy life. But before we meet Russell, let's go back to the year 1996 to see what was happening when he was turning 21. In New Zealand, Jim Bolger is PM. The New Zealand government sells the Radio New Zealand commercial arm to Clear Channel, creating the radio network, which today includes networks such as News Talk ZB, The Hits, my favourite back in the day, Radio Hauraki. At the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, New Zealand wins 3 gold medals, 2 silver and 1 bronze medal, while in the National Provincial Rugby Championships in Auckland, Russell be happy, Auckland defeats Counties Manukau a whopping 46-15. That is a thumping. Across the ditch, back here in Australia at the 1996 federal election, Labor loses 31 seats, with John Howard defeating Paul Keating's Labor Party, Labor having been in government since Bob Hawke took over in 1983. And months later, the Port Arthur tragedy occurs, with the Australian government introducing a nationwide ban on the private possession of automatic and semi-automatic rifles. In the US, Hurricane Bertha causes nearly $500 million damage, and the Nintendo 64, remember that? The Nintendo 64, probably got one of the old Nintendo 64s in the garage, sure we do, is released in North America. Some of the biggest hit singles of the year included Macarena, Who Can Forget Kerry Ann and Peter Costello on the Midday Show, Wonderwall by Oasis, and Celine Dion's Because You Loved Me. And the world got a little sadder with Gene Kelly, he of Singing in the Rain fame, dying. Gene Kelly was aged 83. It's 1996 when our guest Russell Dixon turned 21. Well, Russell, thank you so much for joining us. You heard that introduction. What was 1996, the year that you turned 21, like? What do you remember about that year?
Wow, 1996. That seems so long ago, huh? It really does. It's more than half my life ago. Wow, 1996. I don't remember a great deal from that year, not because I was drinking so much because everybody else was turning 21 and I was going to their parties. But no, I do remember, I think it was the final year of my, the second year of my qualification. I was doing a hospitality management 3-year diploma. I do remember going to a lot of 21sts and watching a lot of my friends do yard glasses. And I do remember having my own 21st, which was a pretty big party at a place called Ceramco Park in just out of Dunedin in Auckland. And a lot of friends and family came, and most people got horrendously drunk, and there was lots of food, lots of alcohol. I got given some really cool gifts. And enjoyed that time. I remember being given the option. My father said to me, look, we've given your older brother and sister a little bit of money for their 21st. My brother bought a keyboard with it. I can't remember what my sister did, but I thought, no, I don't want to buy anything material. I want to have an experience that I can remember. And I guess that's what I just told you about. It was a pretty good night.
Yeah. Wonderful. How many people were there? Did you get up? Were you singing it? Well,
no, there was. My dad might have played. My dad's band played a little bit of music, I think. But other than that, we just put the stereo on and had a lot of music. We had some lights and created some atmosphere. Yeah. There would have been maybe around 100 to 150 people. So quite a few people, a lot of school friends, a lot of tech friends, and people that I'd worked with over the years, and of course friends and family as well.
Wonderful. So obviously we're going to talk about your career. A musical family, very quickly. What's the go with Dad being in a band? That must have been pretty cool.
Yeah, so I grew up in a musical family. My father was head of music at Waitakere College. He played in a band, but while he was music teacher at the school, he also produced and directed the school shows, the talent quests, all of that kind of thing. And so as a young child growing up, I was always going to see those productions. And sometimes I'd be, because my dad was looking after me at the same time, I'd be sitting in on rehearsals or in school choir rehearsals, that kind of thing. My mother was a scenic artist and a woman who performed on stage herself. So I often found myself at the theatre waiting for her while she was painting stage sets, that kind of thing. So I was very much in the environment I played piano. I grew up with music, did a lot of singing, just along to tape cassettes on the old Pioneer system and learning about musicals. And so music was in my blood. I was exposed to music and theatre at a very young age. And I've never not known it, to be honest. It was,
That's fantastic.
It was always there.
Let's fast forward to today. And we're obviously having a bit of we're just recording this in, late January 2023. And I got to say, as I was saying to you beforehand, I think the last time I saw you was the closing night of Beauty and the Beast when you were Gaston, and I've probably got the T-shirt somewhere. I think it was 2006. So I tell you what, you've for you to come and have a chat for someone you haven't seen in nearly 20 years is impressive. But what does life look like now? Because I've mentioned, and I will put the show notes. The last time I saw you obviously in person was back in Wellington. But I was watching a movie with my son last year, and there you are in a British kids movie, which was hilarious. I nearly fell for a sec. So what are you doing these days?
So what am I doing these days? Well, I'm back from England, obviously. I'm back living in Auckland. Yep. And there are three main avenues to most of the work that I do these days. I work as a communications consultant for the Great Scott Company. And we provide tailor-made training solutions, really business communication solutions for businesses throughout Australasia. We've got clients mainly in Australia and in New Zealand. And I do a lot of travel throughout Australia and throughout New Zealand with that kind of work with my clients. Obviously, that took a little bit of a hit during COVID, as every industry did. Yep. So a lot of the work I do now has been pushed to the Zoom platform. And just this morning, I was talking with clients in the Waikato from a coaching perspective, working on various aspects of their business communications. That's one thing I do. I also work with a company called Opportunity. And Opportunity are actually New Zealand's largest travel and entertainment company. And they provide around 8 concert tours a year that travel throughout New Zealand with performances. And they also have the other side of the business, which is travel. And they produce anywhere from sort of 18 to 26 major trips every year throughout New Zealand and overseas. Not just in Australia, but over to all sorts of different countries. And these tend to be music festival trips or trips for people which have a real music type of focus. The reason they tend to fly under the radar and why a lot of people haven't heard of them in New Zealand is because they specialise in a senior community or in the senior market. So most of the people who I'm performing for or escorting overseas in various music festival trips are sort of your 60 to 70 plus in age bracket. Right.
So it's your reverse Kentucky tour.
Yeah, kind of. So maybe slightly easier in terms of the activities, a real focus on the music, a lot of focus on history and architecture and geography and food and musicals. Right. So I do that as well. I also run my own little production company, which is called RD Entertainment. And through that, I build bespoke productions for various outfits, whether they're corporates or retirement villages, that kind of thing. I am a director of musicals. And most recently would be the production of Mary Poppins at the Civic Theatre in Auckland in 2020, which was the biggest show in the world at the time because most other theatres had shut down because of COVID.
Yes.
So I direct theatre. I perform on occasion in various musicals. I'm a marriage celebrant. Yeah. I MC for various functions and events and international conferences, that kind of thing. So you're probably getting a picture now that I'm pretty diverse, and I do a lot of different things and contract myself out, keeping life really interesting.
So let's go back to that 21st, and you're at Tech. What was the career plan? Because to me, just listening to that, and you sent your bio over, and we were catching up, and I've been following on Facebook for many years since I think Facebook kicked off. And I've always, enjoyed seeing the things that you've been doing. Was there a career plan in mind? Because when you read that biography of yours, there really is a very long and impressive list of both on stage and screen, on and off stage, and those screen credits, including Gangster Granny, who I'll probably keep name dropping along the way. But how have you managed your career firstly, and how, was there a career plan? So let's just go back maybe to that 21st kind of environment. Was there a grand plan for Russell, or did that evolve over time?
There have been plans, but I've never really planned sort of more than 3 to 5 years into the future. And I think not by choice, but I tend to be a person who kind of tries to live in the present. And that has positive and negative attributes to it. It's good to be planning, but it's also good to take stock of what you've got right here and now and just enjoy that from time to time. Because I think a lot of people that I work with in a communications consultants kind of way sort of dwell on the past and fear the future too much. And sometimes it's best just to stay in the present and take things as they come. But back at that 21st time, while I was doing my hospitality management diploma, I had a career path at that time of either being, I wanted to be a famous chef. I was started doing my Bar 3 in chefing. I'm a fully qualified chef, but I didn't really pursue that. I did quite a bit of TV work as a chef and duelled with Jamie Oliver and was hosting the Teagle Taste Kitchens and doing Master Foods commercials and the Auckland Food Show demonstrations, that kind of thing. But I realised it wasn't really my passion. There's a lot more that goes to chefing and cooking, and that is what they call the mise en place, or your preparation and the cleanup at the end. So I started to fall out of favour with that. Then I wanted to be the general manager. I remember I set my sights on being the general manager of the Chicago Hilton. That was where I was going to go. And upon finishing my 3-year diploma in hospitality management, I realised that I had lost a bit of my passion for that industry. And so I went back for a little while working in retail. I worked for a wine company as a consultant, and when I started to pursue other things, at that time, and that's when I started chefing on television. I got back into my theatre. I became a TV3 weather presenter, as you've noted, and I started to get pulled in different directions around the country to perform in various musicals, including Beauty and the Beast in Wellington, which is where I met you and had a pretty extraordinary time with that show.
That was a great show, and a shout out to that entire cast. That after party was one for the ages. Anyway, we move on. And that's where, because I only lived in New Zealand for a few years, but my understanding of who you were came from you being on TV, and then suddenly this TV guy appeared in the show. It's like, oh, okay, wow. And I loved it. So, and they're like, oh, no, he's been on TV for years. He's been a chef. I'm like, okay. As you do. That's fantastic. I love it. So your career's evolved over time, and I guess you've obviously taken those opportunities both in New Zealand and overseas, and that kind of portfolio approach now. As we think about leadership, and obviously your leadership spans a whole bunch of areas, as a performer, how do you reconcile being able to do what you're doing with the performing and doing auditions, be it for TV or stage or screen? And you go in and you do the audition, but really it's you could do a brilliant audition, as I'm sure you've done many times, but basically you get the part depending on someone else's gut feel for you. How do you reconcile that?
How do I reconcile it with? How do you mean? How do I reconcile it with what?
So, as a performer, so you could be at the top of your game, doing the best auditions in the world, and your career to an extent is beholden by people who might go, but doesn't fit what we're looking for.
I see. I see. Yeah.
I haven't done I've obviously only ever done the amateur stuff. You've obviously, but you're the professional. How do you kind of accept that being what it is when it's part of your career?
Yeah, it's a good question you ask, actually. I'm the first person to say that the performing arts industry is the hardest industry of them all. Now, I know that I haven't worked in all the industries, but I have worked in many, whether it be retail, whether it be hospitality, whether it be communications, whether it be I don't know. There's so many different things that sort of comprise my backstory, and different areas where I've worked. But nowhere else where do you put your heart and soul on the line? Do you expose yourself without any necessary progression, like the performing arts industry? And nowhere else do you get kicked back and pulled down and pulled down. It's really feast or famine. Sometimes you've got a lot of roles and then you've got no work. You never have job security, therefore you never have financial security. It really is a tough industry to be involved in because you're in and out of work and you're up and you're down. And that graph of peaks and troughs in terms of happiness and depression starts to become a really extreme graph with a lot of distance between the peaks and the troughs, and you've got to be able to manage that. You've got to be able to adapt that Wile E. Coyote sort of tenacious attitude to keep going, but also keep everything in perspective so that you don't get too despondent and downhearted about the industry when it doesn't go your way. I think one of the ways that I've managed to accept the industry and work within it and stay within it and continue to work within it is by keeping everything in perspective and diversifying.
Right.
And New Zealanders are really good at diversifying. As you can tell by my credentials and the things that I'm doing now, I've got many different avenues of income, and I fill my time throughout the year as work comes in. If I've got no work, then I go and produce it and create it and build it and sell it, I also know that...
And that can't be easy because it's not a 9-to-5 job. I mean, you're having to sell yourself as a performer, as a director. No one knew COVID was going to come along, clearly.
Yeah.
It must take a remarkable amount of resilience, having done this for a couple of decades now, for you to go, this is what I want to do, because the easy out would have been, well, I'll go back to chefing, or I'll stay in management, or I'll.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like you've taken the harder choice, and deliberately so. Is that a fair observation?
Deliberately so? No, I've sort of continued to find myself in work. I have tried to come out of this consultancy kind of or portfolio lifestyle, but found myself going back into it because, number one, it's interesting. It's different. I've got a degree of autonomy over my time. I can pick and choose things that I do. I've also been successful enough to keep doing it. I have tried to pull myself out and do 9-to-5 jobs, but then find myself getting bored or finding it tedious with the routine and wanting a bit more excitement. Yeah. And at the moment, it's not always easy. It's not always fantastic, but it's really interesting and it's rewarding and it's fulfilling. And it comes back to my philosophy of what life is all about, which is effectively our job is to just really be happy, to try to be happy and to do things, do stuff. I've often talked when I've been a keynote speaker for a conference, or I'm talking to students, or whether they be performing arts students or just people at a school, my recommendation is do stuff. Just do stuff. Don't just sit back and stagnate and let life pass you by. Get out there and do stuff. And at the moment, I mean, I'm directing a big major musical this year. I've got clients that I'm communicating. I'm providing communication skills to. I've got my own production company producing things. With opportunity, I've got 2 concert tours that I'm doing this year, as well as a whole lot of trips that I'm involved in, one that goes to Fiji, one that goes to Ireland, one that goes around the west coast of the South Island. So I anchor myself to things that I know I've got coming up within my calendar. And then I look for the gaps that I've got, and I make myself available for new client work, or I produce more performances or productions that I can go and present to various contacts that I have to keep the work rolling in and to keep the money rolling in, I guess, to survive. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you've got to be very, very organised, I guess, too, in that way with you and your wife, in terms of how where am I going to meet? That 9-to-5 role is definitely not there when you're jumping on a plane to go into Ireland for a couple of weeks.
Look, I train personal efficiency and effectiveness as a communications consultant. So I train management and leadership, and I train organisation. So I'm really good at it. And the other thing to add to that is I have an incredibly patient wife who is also understanding of the industry, understanding of my career, is happy to be without me for a periods of time, and then let me assimilate back into our home environment when I return. So, there's a lot of things that I'm thankful for that seem to work nicely and in a synchronization with this weird sort of crazy lifestyle, but interesting lifestyle that I have.
That's fantastic. Let's talk about some of the leadership points, because there's some really interesting points you raised. As a professional performer and now someone who's obviously directing your own shows, how do you lead, particularly, and I only reflect on the production that I met you in, but that was a mix of paid professionals like yourself and some of the other leads, and then we mere mortals that were looking like crazy people up the back. So how do you, when you're in that environment, lead a mix of paid and non-paid cast with a mix of, I guess, off-stage cast, off-stage crew that may have been very experienced or not very experienced? Because to me, that seems like a real mix of different styles of leadership that you'd need to really employ in that environment.
Yeah. And from memory, that production of Beauty and the Beast in Wellington wasn't without its challenges. I don't know if you can remember back that far, but
I can.
If you remember that production, we lost our musical director three nights from opening.
We did.
The set that was sitting on the stage was so heavy that it bowed the stage and we couldn't move it. And so we actually opened that show with our first dress rehearsal. Our opening night was our first dress rehearsal. And one of the other paid professionals who played the role of the Beast was Glenn Drake. And I remember he and I sitting down and talking and going, hey, it feels like the wheels have fallen off. No pun intended, in terms of the set, but it feels like we're going to have to step up here to help some of the cast through this process, because we are against it. But this is theatre, and we're experienced. We've been in it before. We've seen the wheels come off before. So in terms of leadership, as the paid professionals coming in, I knew that we had to lead by example, number one. And so by being level-headed, calm under pressure, trying to keep everybody calm and still enjoying the process when we had people in tears backstage, I think they needed to see that if we were okay, then they would be okay. We also communicated effectively with the director and the choreographer to ensure that the first violinist of the Wellington Symphonia, I think it was able to come in and take hold of that conductor's baton and lead our orchestra through that ordeal. It meant that we I mean, Glenn and I and a number of other leads, we said, look, let's get together during the day and we'll take you through the show and we'll make sure that you know what you're doing as a conductor in terms of leading the orchestra. So we stepped up. So in terms of leadership, we lead by example. We were cool and calm under fire. We tried to keep everybody happy. We tried to keep everybody having fun, and keep that theatrical sort of vibe of we're actually here because we enjoy it. I'll keep that alive.
Yes.
But we also stepped up in terms of doing whatever it was that we could do during the day and during our free time to get other people prepared so that we could then put our best foot forward and open with our first dress rehearsal. And I remember when that curtain came down, we all sort of there was a pause and there was a period of about 2 seconds where we all went, oh my God, we did it. How did we get through that? And I think one of the things
no one got injured.
No one got injured. But I remember Glenn and I talking to the company saying, all we have to do is our job, our individual jobs. Don't worry about anybody else. Just do what you need to do, and everything will come together. And that transferred through to the crew. It transferred through to the orchestra. It transferred through to all of those people that are also there in supporting roles, not just on stage, but mainly off, in terms of pulling flies and bringing on set elements and all of those aspects of theatre.
It's quite a complicated set too.
Yeah, it was incredibly complicated and dangerous,
Yes. I remember I had to take my glasses off many times and I'm like, I can't see what I'm about to be biting
sure.
on.
And that's how it all came together. And we actually had an amazing 3-week season over summer. And I have so many fabulous memories from that particular production, in terms of overcoming adversity, but also having such a neat group of people around me or around us to work with and enjoy the company of.
Well said. That's a great segue into my next question, which is about what's your leadership style? And I think you've given us a bit of a taste there. And how has it evolved over time? Because you don't necessarily wake up one day and you've got a fully formed leader. What's your leadership style and how has it evolved over time, Russell?
I think some people are really good at leadership naturally. I've heard people say that you can either do it or you can't. I don't necessarily believe that, because I believe that people can be developed into good leaders. One of the things that I say during management and leadership training is that leaders don't necessarily develop people. They develop other leaders. So it's leading by example, but also empowering people and setting them up with the skills and the confidence and the tools to develop into leaders themselves, not necessarily of other people, but of themselves. So they're natural leaders of their own person. In terms of my leadership style, I believe in setting clear expectations and getting buy-in to that. And there are techniques that I use about setting clear expectations so that they're not just things that I dictate to people or to a cast or to a group that I'm managing, but asking them, do we feel that this is acceptable as a group? This is a two-way street. I've got expectations on you, but I believe you should have expectations on me so that we all feel that we've got a say in how we're going to move forward as a team.
Yes.
That's important.
Yes, very true.
In saying that, I haven't always been the great leader that I would like to be, but I learned from my mistakes. And I've made many, many mistakes over the years, as we all do because we're all human. But each time I've made a mistake, I've gone, okay, don't do that next time, or how do I approach that next time? As a director of musical theatre, I've made all sorts of mistakes over the last 11 years, 10 years that I have been directing major productions throughout New Zealand. And I've had very successful shows, but they haven't come without lessons, So I think a good leader should always be aware of the environment. It's all about communication. It's all about trying to keep people happy and also leading by example and bringing a degree of energy and passion to whatever you're doing. But the other side of all of that is perfect planning prevents piss poor performance. You've probably heard of the P's.
It's true.
As a director or as a leader, I do a lot of research. I do a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, a lot of organisation, so that I'm providing an environment where people can succeed. I'm also providing an environment where I have already thought of all of the potential pitfalls or downsides or the areas that are of concern, so that I'm prepared for them and I'm ready for them and I know how to navigate those difficult times as well. Other than that, it's just about being confident and happy and organised and knowing what I'm doing and being experienced in what I'm doing. I'm only a leader with the things that I know I'm good at, and I've got a wealth of experience behind me to support my right to be there in terms of a leader.
You touched on that word navigation. How do you navigate some of those egos? And I'm not just referring to theatre, but obviously, you've worked. You've been on TV every night for numerous years in New Zealand. And how do you navigate some of those egos, both as someone who's the performer or working in that the employee environment, and also then as a director? Because the little example you gave there about Beauty and the Beast back in 2006 was a fantastic example, I think, of people like you and Glenn and some of the others really stepping in and going, right. And that cast was exceptionally close. And I know you've done, dozens and dozens and dozens of productions. That was my third and last one. And I look back at that production, for example, and go, that was a close cast because of the adversity. How do you navigate some of those egos in that kind of portfolio approach that you need to deal with?
It's a good question once again. Look, I have performed in some major musicals overseas, and I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet here, but to create context for the question you're asking and the answer I'm going to give, working with big stars over in the UK. In that movie, for example, I was understudying Robbie Williams in Gangster Granny, and I was working with David Williams and Miranda Hart, and Joanna Lumley was on set. But working in major musicals on the West End in London, some big stars, like the guy in a poster that's right behind me called Marty Pello from the band Wet, Wet, Wet. The funny thing is the really talented people that I've worked with are actually lovely. The people who present a really difficult ego are often the people who are in a position of celebrity or in a position of power that don't necessarily have the right to be there because they haven't actually earned their ticket. They've just managed to find themselves there because they're incredibly good looking and have been picked up for this role in a TV show or on a movie or that kind of thing, and have created a degree of celebrity status or sort of household name, but haven't necessarily got there by training and the hard graft of musical theatre and going from audition to audition through audition and working through that process. When it comes to working with egos, as a leader, I set very clear expectations early on. and I hold people
Right.
accountable to those, and I note them down. And so I hold people to how we're going to conduct ourselves. As a director, I don't care who you are or who you think you are. If you're going to be a member of my company for a big show, the show comes first. And I say this, and I say my loyalty is not to you. My loyalty is to the show. So every decision that I make from here on in will be in the best interests of the production. And if you or your ego are going to get in the way of that, then number one, you're going to start to see a side of me that you're not going to enjoy. And number two, I'm going to
Cranky Gaston.
Number two, I'm going to have to start managing you in a way which you're not going to enjoy. And I don't want that, and you don't want that. Nobody else wants that. So, in terms of managing ego, one of the things I do is nip it in the bud early on. I set clear expectations and I nip things in the bud early on, and I do that carefully. I don't do it in front of other people where people lose face. I do it privately where we have private discussions, and I say, hey, look, what's going on? Why am I seeing this side of you now? Everything is very consultative. This is what I train as a communications consultant as well. So it's not finger pointing and going, you're doing this. It's very much, I'm noticing this kind of behavior. Talk to me. What's going on? Because I want to help you. Or I need to see a change in your attitude or your performance at the moment. How do we get there? So it's asking questions as opposed to giving direction to see if we can find a common ground, or if you need some help from me in terms of turning a corner, that kind of thing. So it's a careful, calm approach. I never lose my cool, but I'm carefully consultative, and I'm also empathetic. I don't get it right all the time. We are human. I understand that, and sometimes in theatre, in particular, people are under pressure and people can snap. There's an undercurrent with people. We don't always know what's going on beneath the surface.
That's right.
So it's a careful approach to understanding people first, and then trying to get them to allow me in to their sphere of their world, so that I can help them and find a pathway out of that quagmire that they're in, and get them performing again, or get them to a level of communication which isn't arrogant or egotistical, and once again more consultative and of a flavour which is more conducive to a team environment rather than an individual pursuit.
That's wow. What I'm getting from you is there's a lot of those hard business lessons are actually completely transferable to any form of life, be it theatre. I was listening to you going, you're giving us a fantastic sporting analogy, like the coach or the captain before the rugby team goes out, and it's like, it's not about you. It's actually, there's 15 of you, for example, on the pitch of the rugby. You've got to,
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. And that's why I'm a good communications consultant, and why I've got clients throughout Australasia, because they know my background, but they know my approach and my history and experience. I was captain of my school first 11. So I understand that sporting environment. I understand the theatre environment. I understand the business environment. But at the end of the day, it's people and it's effective communication. So nothing really changes. It's just the environment that you're in, but the approach is really kind of identical.
So in that context, how do you get, as a director or as someone who's, on stage, on set with probably William, so no pressure, how do you get into the best headspace to perform at your best?
Once again, I mean, this comes back to management and leadership. Once again, I said perfect planning prevents piss poor performance.
Yes.
So I'm directing a production of Matilda in Tauranga this year, and that show doesn't go to season until September. I was already planning and preparing my huge show resource back in November last year.
Wow.
I finished. I read the book again for about the third time. I watched the 1980s movie with Danny DeVito. When the musical I've seen umpteen times, probably 10 times, and I also watched the new musical movie that just came out in December as well.
Yes,
so I've got a handle on that,
which is great. We enjoyed that the other night. Yeah, great school holiday movie.
Which is, although it's a movie musical based on the musical, it's actually very, very different, which I'm happy to see.
Right.
Because then I can't be accused of plagiarism when it comes to the show that I put on the stage in sort of 10 months' time, or
fair enough.
dare I say, 9 months' time.
9 months.
But a lot of planning, a lot of organisation.
Yep.
When it comes to direction, I won't read the script any less than, say, 20, 25 times. Because every time I read the script, I focus in on different things. I'm focusing in on one character and their relationship with that character.
Right.
Or I'm going to read it again and just focus in on the set changes. Or I'm going to read it again and focus in on the costume changes or the wig plot. All of these different components that I need to have control over. So a lot of it's just planning, research, and then just having everything as organised as it can be, and communicated as effectively as it can for everybody who needs to be communicated to, and then trying to preempt things that I know are going to be problems, like specific holidays that are going to be interrupting the rehearsal process, or political events, or things that I know are coming that I can earmark.
Yep.
But then also...
Again, so that comes down to preparation.
Yeah, comes down to preparation. But then also being in a position to then roll with the punches as they arrive, knowing that those punches are going to come. Yeah, with theatre, we know that production week's going to be challenging. With Matilda, I know that I've got 3 Matildas and 2 casts of children. That's going to be a problem. I know that that's going to present a whole lot of parents that I have to negotiate with as well. So I know these are things that I can anticipate. And also building, this is important, is building a really strong team around me to help shoulder the load, help in terms of delegating tasks, but also to insulate us and the cast from a lot of those problems that we will deal with. Yep. So that the cast just focus on their performances. So building a really strong creative team and production team to insulate them from the issues that we deal with at a higher level. So it all comes down to being experienced and knowing how this game is played, how to anticipate the things that are going to be difficult, but then planning and preparing for all of those aspects of the show that we can do in advance, so that we have a really strong schedule that we're working to, which everybody's got eyes on, and just maintaining that communication effectively through various avenues when we get down to business and we start to approach that deadline, which of course is always opening night.
Do you get nervous when you go on stage? Like when you were doing the TV3 news, and you were doing that for 3 years. Did you get nervous when they were counting you in? We're just going to start now, Russell, or was it?
I was initially, and I have been nervous for theatrical productions. I don't really get nervous these days. If anything, while I was working over in London, and I was in a production called Top Hat for 2 years, the most dangerous aspect of that was complacency. Because it becomes your job, your 9 to 5 type of job. Although it's not 9 to 5,
that's your 9 to 5.
But you're doing the same show 8 times a week, and you do it for 2 years. Complacency is your greatest enemy.
So how do you guard against that? Because that's a very important point. It's a very different thing for Showbiz Wellington to do 18 show run in 3.5 weeks. Thanks very much, but. And we had our day job, so it was like something to look forward to. You're doing that 8 times a week for 2 years. How do you keep the zip up? How do you,
I think
you haven't slept well and I've got to get up for it.
Yeah, well, number one, I was in the best shape of my life during that show because each morning I'd get up and go to the gym, and I had a diet regime. So planning and prepping, once again, keeping myself in a good physical space, physical body, good healthy body, healthy mind. Everybody's different, but for me, 2 things it comes down to. Number one, professionalism, i.e. there's a standard that I hold myself to. And how do I keep myself in that professional state before a show? Well, I call it zoning. It's what I do about 30 minutes before the show or before I get in front of a camera, is I zone. I get myself into the zone, and I know when I'm in the zone, I'm actually highly effective. I still do it to a degree when I'm emceeing an event, or I'm presenting to a group of people in a business meeting or in a conference space, whatever it might be, as a keynote speaker. I just zone myself, which gets the brain working. I've got good recall of memory. I'm relatively articulate, and I've got a good sense of vocabulary in terms of trying to articulate the things I want to say. That's how I do it. But in saying that, I'm not always perfect. I am human. I do make mistakes. We all do. But I go easy on myself as well. You know, if I make mistakes, I make a mistake. I try not to let it happen again. You know, but
Give
that's
yourself
how
a
I
note
do
for
it.
the night before and keep going.
Yeah.
Love it. Absolutely. That being prepared, being in top shape. So is it fair to say that you're the type of person that takes their job seriously, but is also very grounded in your own sense of self? Because the Russell I'm talking to today is, you know, I just recall you being very easygoing, and, you know, you didn't come in with an ego, and people, you know, none of the leads did actually in that production. Has that been something that you've always kind of just to step back a little bit from yourself and go, hang on, you know, TV3 today, you know, ex-TV3 presenter in Wikipedia tomorrow kind of thing? How have you made sure you've always kept yourself nice and grounded?
I think it comes down to your personality and how you're brought up. I've had a family which has always kept me very grounded. I've got a brother and sister that still think I'm a bit of an idiot, you know, and that's sibling
Fair enough.
Sibling prerogative, and that's fine.
Yes.
But I also know myself to be a bit of an idiot. I know that I don't get things right all the time. I know that if I criticise somebody else for something, then I better be bloody perfect at it myself if I'm going to take that kind of attitude. As a manager, as a leader, I try to, I strive to be, to lead by example and do things the best that I can. But I know that if I'm going to get things wrong from time to time, that other people can as well. It's about how we deal with that. But I've always prided myself on not having an ego. I don't like ego. I hate it, in fact. And I say that to my cast when I'm directing. I say, there's nothing I hate more than just people who come in with arrogance and ego. Nobody likes it. It's not conducive to a team environment. People don't like you when you're like that, so why be like it, you know? You're only doing it for your own self-gratification, and if getting along with people and creating more friends and having fun is desirable, then the best thing you can do is lose the ego. So I don't like it in other people, therefore why would I let it manifest itself in me? And I've been intuitive towards that right from an early, you know, as an early teenager. There have been times when I have been a bit egotistical, just because you grow through that process. And every time I've been like that, I've noticed that people don't like me or don't like the way that I'm behaving. And so I've gone, well, maybe I shouldn't be that. There is a fine line between confidence and arrogance. So I'm careful to keep that in mind. I'm sure there are people who think that I am egotistical or arrogant purely because of the position I'm in or the things that I've got to do as a director or that kind of thing. But I think that's a misinterpretation. Often it's because as a director, you're actually under pressure, and you're in what I call bull mode, that direction mode of this needs to happen, you need to do this, that needs to go there, stop doing that, I need you to do this, that kind of thing. And when you're in that sort of autocratic mode or leadership mode, it can come across as being a little bit sort of direct and abrupt and dismissive and authoritative. But that's because of the situation that we're in. We need to keep that in mind.
Yes.
You'll find that after the process, and when we go and sit down and have a drink at the end of the night or, you know, in reflection, we're talking about things, you'll find that I'm actually a nice person. we were just I
could vouch for that.
We were just all under pressure. But I also take care of that ego by saying, guys, we're coming into the business end. It's going to be challenging. We're going to be dealing with a lot of pressure. All of us, not just me, but you as well. So we need to take a load off and just bear in mind that sometimes we might say things in a heated fashion that we don't mean, or we might do things in a very direct manner where we don't mean it to be like that, but we just need action, you know. So it might come across as being a little bit antagonistic at the time, but come and talk to me if you feel like I'm being hard on you or if I'm pushing you too hard, because I can promise you I'm worried about other things, not you. It's just an energy that we're all experiencing. So I prepare everybody for it.
Yeah. No, what a great philosophy. As we think about again theatre and live music, are there people in the media or in your professional career, for example, that you've looked up at and gone, gee, they're a great leader? Who might they be, or the type of leadership, I guess? So, and why? Are there people that you've naturally gone, oh, that's a great way of doing it. Or, you take something from someone's, toolbox of leadership.
I've got a whole bunch of heroes that I have stolen management or leadership qualities from, heaps and heaps in different areas as well. I remember when I made it into our school first 11 when I was in the fifth form, or back that would have been year 11, I guess. And the captain of our first 11 was a guy by the name of Nigel Nelson. He was a really good natural leader, and we did amazing things that year. I mean, I was lucky to be in the top soccer team at school as a 15-year-old or whatever I was. But my skills were good enough to just make it in. But I remember looking up to him and thinking, gosh, I really want to do well for you. Now, what are the qualities in you that I'm seeing that make me want to perform for you and do well by you and obtain your acceptance and your respect? And it was just his leadership by example, the fact that he didn't get despondent, that he wasn't egotistical. He built the team. Yeah. He built individuals within the team. If there was something that needed to be talked about, he didn't do it in front of the team, But if there was something to be championed, then you do it in front of the team, so that we're building community, and we're building communication, and we're building a culture. So I learned that then, working with really good directors over the years, like Stephen Robertson, who directed Beauty and the Beast. I've performed in a number of shows with him at the helm, and there are great leadership qualities as a director that I was able to garner from him. There have also been terrible directors that I've worked with over the years and gone, okay, well, I don't want to do that like you've done it, and I would do that differently, and I'd do that differently. I don't like the way that you direct because you don't do this, 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 and this, as opposed to this director who does do that and that and that. My boss, if you like, or the director of the Great Scott Company, a lady by the name of Jackie Scott, hence the name the Great Scott Company. She's an incredible leader, and she's one of my best friends, and she's a confidant, and she's a sounding board. And because she's so good at what she does as a communications consultant and as she would say a barrier removal specialist, I've learned so many lessons about how to effectively teach sales or customer service or management and leadership or personal efficiency training and organisation. So she's an example that I've followed. My mum and my dad are excellent examples. My brother and sister at times have been really good examples of leaders. Funny thing is, I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks with my nieces and nephews, and they're exceptional young kids coming into into young adulthood now, and I learn lessons from them as well. So, if you're aware, if you don't have an ego, and if you put yourself out there to share experiences with people, it's amazing what you can learn. And I've been trying to develop my nieces and nephews as natural young leaders. And in the process of trying to teach them to be leaders and natural leading hands, I've actually learned lessons from them that will make me a better leader as well. So it's about being aware and looking for opportunities to grow and develop within yourself as much as anything.
As we begin to wrap up, and again, thank you so much for your, we're getting literally a leadership masterclass today, which is fantastic.
You're very welcome.
Who's one performer in New Zealand that you've seen or performed with that you go, yeah, okay, I pay to see you? Who's
oh gosh, I could name.
Or are there a couple?
There's a couple. There's a number of performers that I've worked with. One very talented actor and slash director that I've worked with would be Mark Hadlow. Mark Hadlow and I did a musical production called Golf, the musical. In fact, it had two other performers of note. It had Ray Wolf, for those of us who remember Ray Wolf from the Ray Wolf show back in the sort of late 70s, early 80s. And it had a very dear friend, Lisa Laurel, who I still work with. In fact, we're building a show right now called Sparkling Duets, which we're touring. The four of us, there were just four people in that show. But Mark Hadlow, as a character actor and a performer and as a director, just had so many ideas, was so clever, thought so out of the box, and was so wonderful to work with in terms of building a relationship with somebody on stage, I was in awe of some of the ideas he was instantly able to conjure up and how to put things together. And I just really enjoyed working in that environment with him, because he had great rapport with us as his fellow actors and actresses. But we had a lovely a culture and energy of creative nous that pulled together all sorts of ideas and nuances and relationships between our characters, which really worked for the piece. He would be one person that I would say I'd love to work with again in any form of theatre capacity. I worked. I was in a movie a few years ago called The Other Side of Heaven 2, The Fire of Faith, and this was a Mormon movie, a Latter-day Saint movie that I filmed in Fiji.
Oh, okay.
And I ended up playing one of the supporting lead characters, a guy by the name of Thomas S. Monson, who was a member of the LDS community who went on to become the president of the Mormon faith, effectively like the Pope of the Catholic faith. Yeah. He was the prophet and the person who leads the Latter-day Saint community.
Oh, for the Latter-day Saints.
Yeah. Now, I'm not a Mormon. Okay. I'm not a member of the LDS community, but I was performing this character in this film. And I was working with a very talented American actor called Chris Gorham, who's been in all sorts of things like Ugly Betty, and he was in The Lincoln Lawyer that I watched recently. If you Google him, you'll find he's been in lots of things, but he was the main actor, the main catalyst of this particular movie, and producing a lot of the scenes that we were in together, working with him, seeing him work, understanding his relationship, not just as the two characters, but the culture that we built between us as actors, and the way that we approached our scenes by talking about things beforehand was really, really lovely. Yeah. So we got to work with each other and develop as friends as well as actors in that environment. So I took away a lot from that experience. And there's a lot of other actors and actresses that I've worked with both here in New Zealand and in London on the West End that have grown me as a performer, as a leader, and as a person in general, which who I take my hat off to and credit with having a real impact on me as a person and me as an artist or as a professional.
But a lot of that has to do with you being open to continuing to learn and evolve as a performer and a person, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Being accessible and sitting back and not having an ego, not being arrogant, and just going, there's an opportunity for me here to perform, and there's an opportunity here for me to grow as a person and build some wonderful relationships and friendships with really incredible people, amazing people. And so I've taken the bull by the horns and looked for every opportunity to build those relationships and share those experiences where I can. And that's maybe one of the reasons why you could argue that a lot of my career or some of the things I've done have been successful, because I have looked for that opportunity to grow and develop as a person and build great communications with people and build and develop that network.
So thinking back on what we've discussed today and knowing what you know of you today and your fascinating portfolio career over many years in many different countries, let's go back to that night. What would 21-year-old Russell say to the Russell of today?
Or the other way around? What would? Well,
or both. Yeah. So we're going to start with that one. So what would 21? So go back to you being 21 and then looking out to your life. What would 21-year-old Russell say to Russell of 2023? What advice would 21-year-old Russell give you today?
I think my 21-year-old self today. I don't know. I don't think there's any advice to give. I think it would be more questions to ask, like, am I on the right? Am I on the right track? Have I done the right thing? Is it all going to be okay? Yeah. That kind of thing. It'd be more questions to ask myself from the future. Gosh, wouldn't that be an interesting conversation to be able to sit down with somebody sort of 30 years into the future who's yourself and say, did I get it right, or what did I get wrong? I don't know. I really don't know what that person would say, other than my philosophy at the time as a 21-year-old was to seek adventure. Comes back to that do stuff kind of thing. At the time, I was doing a show with you in Wellington. I was playing a really cool role, the role of Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. I was a weatherman on TV3. I had future opportunities. I was going from Wellington to Christchurch and then Dunedin, and I had this idea of leaving New Zealand, leaving TV3, and heading overseas to pursue my boyhood dream of being a lead on the West End stage, which was a goal that I set myself, which I did actually manage to achieve. So I guess what the 21-year-old self would say, this is where I'm at the moment, this is my headspace, and that's where I'm going. Yeah. I hope that talking to you now, you can look back and say, yeah, you did pursue that, you have had adventures, and you have achieved that dream.
I think that's fantastic. And what would Russell of 2023 say to 21-year-old Russell? I think that's
I'm happy to say that I have maintained that philosophy. It hasn't always been plain sailing. I've had my high moments and my down moments. I've had my elation and I've had my deep, dark, depressive moments like everybody does. And you've got to have both in order to keep everything in perspective. If you haven't been down in the doldrums, you don't know what it's like to be on the other side. And if you haven't been happy, you don't know what it's like to go, you know what? I need to understand that this happiness, that this elation that I'm feeling at the moment, these are the moments worth living for. But I know that at some point I'm going to come back down that graph. I'm going to go back down that trough, and I know that I can anchor myself to those peaks in the past to know that I'm going to get through it okay. And eventually, when you're going through hell, they say, keep going. Because you're liable to come out the other side at some point. And I think I would say to that 21-year-old, don't take life too seriously. It's not always about making as much money as possible. Really do stop and smell the roses. Like literally do stop and smell the roses. Try to live in the present. Continue to seek adventure. Travel. I've never regretted any money I've spent on travel. My wife and I do a lot of travel, and we've got a lot of trips that we're doing this year. We're off to cruise around Alaska this year. It's a trip we've been planning for a number of years now because COVID's kept it at bay. But we continue to travel. We've always set our sights on international places or destinations to get to, and to just keep the glass half full. To take the wins when they come. To keep the losses in perspective, to put out a lot of good energy, stay positive, and if you do, you get a lot of positive energy back, and you get a lot of good stuff, good energy back. That tends to be my philosophy now. Stay positive, stay upbeat, good times ahead, and the bad times just make you stronger to deal with lessons that are coming your way, which make you a stronger and better person ultimately in the end anyway.
Russell, thank you. Thank you for your time today and a busy time for you. And congratulations on that one really interesting, varied, really positive career. And it was great. It's been great to catch up with you and just reflect on not only the leadership lessons, but also I love that comment at the end about, you've got to just walk through hell and, keep going. And that's that very active approach, I guess, you've been taking since you were 21. And congratulations on a fascinating career, because a lot of people would have gone, I don't want to do this, or it would have been too easy, or, for you to kind of go and follow that passion that obviously was imbued with you and in that family environment back in your early years. And I because you've got a younger family, but if I was to say to the kids here, spend it, get on a plane, go and learn. That wonderful New Zealand tradition of OE is just one. I think Australians could learn a lot from that kind of get on a plane, go and experience the world, find yourself when you're over there. So thank you so much for being a great castmate all those years ago in Wellington. And again, it's Liza and I did. So it was the for me at a personal level, it was something I look back on with great fondness, and I, as you and I both are, we're still in touch with a lot of that cast, which I think says a lot. Nearly 20 years, 17 years later. But for most of all, for you, thanks for your insights today, your your reflections on yourself and for keeping it real. And I think if there's a lesson from me for this, it's really keeping it real, communicate, and don't take yourself too seriously. And we're looking forward, obviously, to seeing you in the next stage of your career, being, in Ireland or the West End or Dubai again or wherever. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been fantastic.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the opportunity. And I'll leave you with one phrase that I coined a couple of years ago, which I'm kind of proud of. It's a little bit, I don't know, quirky, but it's that life happens in colour when you're outside your comfort zone. And it's so sometimes we've got to look for opportunities to get outside the comfort zone, to really suck up the marrow of life. Great to catch up with you, Jeremy. All the best for you and your family.
Much appreciated, Russell.
Can't wait to catch up again soon.
Good on you.
Take care.
Good on you. Thank you for your time today. And thanks for joining us on D21 Russell. That's fantastic. You find people as they are. And one of the things I vividly recall, and Russell alluded to it, I think, quite candidly, but also really openly, was that cast. And it was a mix. It's interesting, Izio, because a lot of the time you have professionals working with amateurs to put on these very, very lavish musical theatre productions. And Russell, even then, was a well-established name in musical theatre in New Zealand. And I was definitely not, as anyone who's ever seen me dance in theatre on or off stage, including my poor son in Bunnings occasionally, would attest to. But Russell was one of those people. He was doing TV3 weather, literally doing live crosses before he jumped on stage with us over that couple of week period. And one of the things I vividly recall, so it's interesting how things stay with you, is his calmness. And I think from that conversation with him today and in the lead up in organising the chat with him, and he's been incredibly gracious and selfless with his time, that was one of the things that I took from Russell: humility, self-reflection, and being aware of the role that people need to have in a production, musical theatre, TV, on stage, off stage, in life. And the analogies that he was giving us in that conversation, I thought were fantastic. And I loved his reflection at the end. So thank you so much, Russell. Thanks for being a great leader in what was a challenging set of circumstances. And a special shout out. People talk about the arts, but I'm one of those people who was very, very fortunate to have some great experiences and continue to have some great experiences through the arts as a young kid, singing the National Boys Choir, and then some theatre in Canberra, and then 3 wonderful shows in New Zealand. And that show, Beauty and the Beast, and I've still got the T-shirt. This was the last one I did. I have definitely hung up my non-dancing boots. I can attest to that. But that show was very special to me because it was the last one I did. So thank you so much, Russell, for your time. Thank you to you wherever you're listening. Much appreciated, as always, for the feedback, and really do appreciate the reviews that you've been giving this show. And as always, to Cursed Kids and the Pooch, thank you. That's it for this episode of Dear 21-Year-Old Me. Wherever you are, stay well, go well, and bye for now.
Thanks for joining us today. For more episodes and links, visit dear21yearoldme.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts.